So, you want to learn React? Well, we all do. It's 2019 and React is the coolest kid of JavaScript these days. So in this video, we are not going to create any fancy apps. Instead, we're going to go ahead and try to understand how React works. So we will focus on the why things work the way they do instead of how things work in React. And don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with that. Oh, React was found in 2014. It was created by Facebook. It's amazing. No, we don't care about that. We care about actually learning React. So if you just give me the next 30 to 40 minutes of your life, you will understand how React works. I can guarantee that. Okay, so without any further ado, let's jump in. Okay, so to get started, we are going to need a project folder. So for that, just go to this link, github.com/hmz.js/learn-react. So what I've done here is I've already created a folder for you using the Create React Apps CLI. So all you need to do now is just go ahead and click on this clone or download button and then click download zip. Okay, so once you've done that, just crack open this zip folder and here are all the files that we need in order to get started. So now what I'm going to do is I'm first going to open this folder in my code editor and I'm using Visual Studio Code. And I'm also going to open this folder in my terminal. Because you see, there is a package.json file here. And this file demands that you install all the relevant Node modules that you need in order for this project to run. Okay, so to do that, just type this command with me, npm install, and press enter. Now, it might take a minute or two, so go ahead and pause this video, and once you've installed all the packages, come back and click play. Okay, so now let's take a look at what's inside. So, inside of this folder, we've got a bunch of files, but the only two files that we're going to be concerned with are the app.js file and the index.js file. Just ignore this message for now. So up next, what we're going to do is we're going to explore and understand what's going on inside this app.js file. Okay, so let's dive right in. Okay, so now we're going to learn about the heart and soul of React, and that is components. So before we actually talk about components, let's go ahead and clean this app.js file. So now all we have left is a plain file. Okay, so now the very first thing that you absolutely have to do while working with React is you have to write this statement at the top of the file, and that is import React from React. Now, why do you have to type this statement? Let's find out. So in order to use the functionality that React offers, it is essential that you first import that functionality, and that is exactly what this line is doing. So the folks who created React must have set something like modules.exports and then set it equal to React or React, and this is why we're able to import this package or this module that lives somewhere inside of these Node modules. Okay, and then what happens is when you import this React module, it comes with a bunch of different methods and some built-in functionality that you then use in your React application. So in short, let me just get rid of that. So in short, this statement is important. It's necessary. You need that. Okay. So now that's out the way. Let's actually learn what a React component is and why we need a React component. So in a nutshell, a React component is a chunk of UI code that we can display onto the web browser. Now that's not very helpful, is it? So let's actually start with creating a React component. So type this with me. Class app extends React.component, followed by a pair of curly braces. Now, this statement is initiating a new instance of a class called React, and that class has a property or a method named component, which is why we are able to access this component property through React. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this React is a module that is being exported in a file somewhere in these node modules. And then we are able to access this class called React because we've imported this React module inside of this file. And by the way, you can name the instance of this class anything. You can call it banana, you can call it dinosaur, it really does not matter. But the common convention is that the name of the component is same as the name of the file. So in this case, the file is called app, and this is why the component is also called app. Okay, but what exactly is going on here? I mean, what is a class? How is this relevant to a component? Let's find out. So this statement is what you call inheritance in JavaScript. Inheritance, as the name suggests, is inheriting the properties and functionality of an existing class. So in this case, the existing class is React, from which we are accessing the component property, and then from there, this app is creating a new instance of this class, meaning it has access to all the properties that live inside of this component property. So to take a deeper look at what classes are, let's go ahead and crack open this index.js file. And just for the record, this index.js file is what is getting exported onto the web browser. So everything that we do inside this file is going to show in the web browser. So to prove it, open this project in your terminal and type in yarn start. And if you don't have the yarn package manager installed, just type in npm start. It's basically the same thing. So once you've done that, press enter, and it should launch this project into your web browser. So currently you don't see anything, but if you go to the console, you see our cool little message here that we logged in. Okay, so now you may ask, how is this index.js file is being displayed onto the web browser? I mean, if we go to our public folder and crack open this index.html file, there is no mention of index.js file. So what exactly is going on? So check this out. Under the hood, this create React app, which is the build configuration that we're using, uses Webpack, and in their Webpack configuration file, they specify that Webpack uses this index.js file as an entry point. And that's the first module it reads, and then it follows from it to other modules to compile them into a single bundle. And then that single bundle is what combines all the code we write in just one file. And then it displays the results onto the web browser. Okay, so now that this little tangent is over, let's close this file and actually talk about classes. So if you've been learning JavaScript for a while, you may have heard of the terms like inheritance and prototype. Now, I'm not actually going to explain what prototypal inheritance is because that is beyond the scope of this tutorial. But I am going to explain how these concepts work within the context of a React component. So let's just go ahead and get rid of this message. Okay, save the file. And now let's assume that you are building a housing society. Now, what would you do? You would take a cookie cutter layout and then you would apply that layout to all the houses that you're going to build, right? So that's exactly what a class is. You create a class, you assign it a few basic properties, and then you can create new instances of that class with their own properties and methods. So type this with me. Class, house, followed by a pair of curly braces. So now this is just a cookie cutter class, okay? Inside of it, we first need to define a constructor function. So type this, constructor, parentheses, followed by a pair of curly braces. Okay, so a constructor function is essential inside of a class because it contains all the properties and methods that we declare. So for example, if we want to set a door color property, we first need to set up a parameter inside of this constructor function, and I'm going to call it door color. And then we can say something like this dot door color equals door color. Okay, so here what we are doing is we're telling this class to have a basic property called door color, and then whatever instance inherits this class can access this property through this parameter. But wait, what is this? I mean, where is this keyword coming from? So the this keyword in JavaScript refers to the object or the method or class that it belongs to. So in this case, it's the house class. So what's happening here is that the this keyword is tying up all the properties that we declare inside of it to its parent class. Okay, so now that we have the basic house class, how do we actually expand it? So check this out. Type const house1 equals new house, followed by a pair of parentheses. And it means that it's the execution of the constructor function that lives inside of this house class. So obviously it takes a parameter. So we can say brown. Now this brown is going to take place of this parameter right here. So if we try to log this house1 instance to the console, let's see what we get back. Console.log house1. Press save, go back to the web browser, and you can see that we actually have the house class and no mention of the house1 instance whatsoever. So we can also access the properties inside of this house class. So we can say something like house1.doorColor. Press save, go back to the web browser, and we just see brown. Excellent. We can also declare our own custom methods inside of a class. So let's say that we want to create a method that displays the door color. So we can say something like display door color and set it to an arrow function, and then inside of it we can console log using the backticks the door. If I can just spell that would be brilliant. The door color is, and then open up an object literal and in there say this. So again, this refers to the original class, which is the house, this dot door color. And then to access this property, all I have to do is go to this console log, and first I'm going to get rid of this door color property, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in house1 dot display door color, and since it's a method, we actually have to fire it using a pair of parentheses. So now if I press save, go back to the web browser, we can actually see that the door color is brown statement is showing up in the console, and that is perfect. Okay, so what's next? So this is all well and good, but how is this whole thing relevant to React? So check this out. Back in this app.js file, we see the keyword extends. Now, I've mentioned this a million times already, but let me drill this down into your brain again. This extends keyword creates a new instance of an existing class. So to actually understand that, let's jump back into our index.js file and try and extend this original house class. So I'm going to get rid of these two statements. And now if I say class new house extends house, followed by a pair of curly braces. Now this statement is creating a new instance of the original house class, and that means it has access to this door color property as well as this display color method. Okay, so let's say that in this class we want to change the door color. So all we have to do is declare our own custom method and call it change door color. Okay, and I'm going to set it to an arrow function and open up a pair of curly braces. And now to access this original door color property, we have to use the this keyword again. So I'm going to say this dot door color. So remember, this points to the original class, and then to actually get the property of door color, we have to say this dot door color, and I'm going to set it to new door color. But wait a minute, where is this new door color coming from? So all we're going to do is we're going to set up a new parameter in this method and call it new door color. There we go. And then set the original door color property to this new door color parameter. Okay, and then we can also declare a console log here. So console.log and say the door color has been set to, and then open up an object literal and inject it the new, the new door color here. Perfect. Now, just a side note, the reason we didn't use the this keywords here in this console log is that the new door color property exists inside of this custom method, meaning it's not tied to this class or the original class, and for that reason there is no need to include the this keyword. Okay, so now if I say const house1 equals new, so this is creating a new instance of new house, which is the class that we have just created. And again, the first things first we absolutely have to do is set up a new parameter inside of this constructor function, and I'm going to set the original color to brown. Perfect. And then I'm going to access this change color method. So what I'm going to say is console.log and house1, and now we actually have the access to this change door color method. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to set the new color to black. Okay, so now if I save the file and go back to the web browser, there is the new updated color. The door color has been set to black. Okay, perfect. So this was a very brief and basic overview of classes and inheritance, but it should give you a good enough understanding of how this fits into the React ecosystem. Okay, so just like we created this original house class and declared this display color method, the creators of React have also created their own class that we extend in the form of components, and that allows us to access the properties and methods that exist in the original React class. And one of those methods is the render method. Okay, and this render method is going to be responsible for displaying everything that happens inside of this component. Okay, so now is a good time to introduce you to JSX. Now, what is JSX? So let's just assume that there are two lovers, okay, HTML and JavaScript, and they decide to get married, and then one day they go to the church, and let's say that React is the priest, okay, and then they decide to have a baby. Now that baby is called JSX. So the JSX has access to HTML and JavaScript at the same time, meaning it allows JavaScript and HTML to coexist within the same file, but only in the presence of the priest, which is React. So if we do not import this React module, we will not be able to use JSX. Now, what does JSX actually look like? So inside of this render method, we first have to say return, followed by a pair of parentheses. Okay, now inside of it, what we can do is just declare a h1 and say hello. Press save, go back to the web browser, and nothing is there. This is because there is no way for the web browser to actually read this app.js file. So if you remember, this index.js file is what is being exported onto the web browser. So in order to display the contents of app.js file, we first need to import those contents inside of this index.js file. And to do that, we first need to export this app component right at the bottom here. So we can say export default followed by the name of the component. Okay. Now what this is doing is it's exporting this app component and making it available to all other files that import this app component into their own files. Okay. So now back in this index.js file, let's just first go ahead and cut all these contents into our clipboard, create a new file here, and call it classes.js and paste it all here just in case you need it for a future reference. Okay, so now back in index.js file we can say import app from, and then is the relevant path, so dot and / this app. Okay, so now if I press save, it's still not going to show in the web browser. The reason is that we first have to render the contents of this app component using a very specific React method called render. Okay, now that render is not the same as this render. Let me just show you what I mean. So the first thing we need to do is we need to import React. So import React from the React package, and then there is another module that we need to make use of, and that is called React DOM. So if I say import React DOM, and DOM is all uppercase, from React DOM. Okay, and in case you're wondering where these packages are coming from, just open up this package.json file, and there you can see all the pre-installed modules. So this is React and that is React DOM, and these are all the pre-installed modules that Create React app provides us with. Right, so now we have to use this React DOM method. So right at the end of this file, I can say React DOM dot render. Okay, and then this method takes two arguments. The first argument is the name of the component that we want to show. So in this case, it's the app component. So app. And this is a self-closing tag. Okay. And the second argument is the target element that we want to add this component to. And that element lives inside of this index.js file, which is right here. Okay. So back in our index.js file, we have to access that root element by saying document.getElement by ID, and the ID was root. Perfect. So now if I press save, go back to the web browser, we can actually see that the H1 is showing up. Right, so this was a lot of effort just to display a little message in the web browser, but this is just the React way of doing things, okay? So we've covered React on a very basic level. Now we can do a lot more than just spitting out some HTML, so we can also embed our own custom JavaScript inside of JSX. Now, as I mentioned earlier, what you see here is JSX, and JSX is not HTML. It's actually just JavaScript code running in the background that allows us to use HTML-like structure inside of a JavaScript file. And this is because of this React package that we've enabled in this file. So check this out. Declare a new constant here called title, and I'm going to set it to a string that says hello. Okay, now all we have to do is type a pair of curly braces. So I'm going to get rid of this static message and a pair of curly braces. And now inside of here, we can embed this title that we declared up there. So I'm going to copy it and paste it right there. Press save, go back to the web browser, and it's still working. And just to prove that it's actually working, let's change this to hello and welcome. Press save, go back to the web browser, and we can see that it is indeed working. Now, one thing to note about JSX is that there can only be one parent element, meaning you cannot return two elements or any multiple elements inside of this return statement. So if I throw in another paragraph tag right here and I say learn React, press save, go back to the web browser, we can see that there is an error. And essentially what this means is that you cannot return multiple elements inside of a return statement. So you can either use a div to wrap all of these elements inside, or you can use a more modern approach, which is using React.fragment. So if I cut these two out, open up a new tag, React.fragment, close it, and inside of there, if I throw in these two elements, press save, go back to the web browser, and we can see that these are indeed showing up on the screen. So what this is doing essentially is just telling React that we're actually returning just one element, which is wrapped inside of React.fragment. And then it's tricking the web browser into thinking that this is just one parent element. And inside of this parent element, we can have as many children as we want. And you can simplify this even further. So you can just get rid of these React.fragment, and you can just leave these empty tags there, and it's going to work just as fine. So these empty tags may appear empty on surface, but React behind the scene compiles them in a way that they get filled with React.fragment in the final bundle. So now if I press save, go back to the web browser, we can see that our content is still showing up on the screen. Okay, so next we're going to learn how to use multiple components in a single file. So first of all, let's go ahead and create a new component, and I'm going to call it class greetings extends react.component. And to open a component, we need to use a pair of curly braces, and then inside of it, a new render method, and then our return statement. Okay, so to return some JSX, what we're going to do is we're going to open up a React fragment. So for that, we can just use a pair of empty tags, just like that. Okay. Now inside of it, the first thing we're going to do is create a new h1, and we're going to say hello. Okay. Next, let's create a paragraph tag that reads learn React. Perfect. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this constant up top, completely get rid of it. Okay, and I'm also going to get rid of these h1 and p tags in here. Now, how do we display another component? So we've actually already done this before. So if we head back to our index.js file, we can see that there is an app component, and we are displaying it using a self-closing tag. So similarly, back in our app.js file, all we have to do is wrap this greeting component in a self-closing tag. Okay, so to do that, let's say open up a tag, type in greetings, and then just close it. Perfect. So if I press save, go back to the web browser, we can see that everything is still there, but just to make sure that it's still working, what we can do is make some changes here. So we can say hello and welcome. Press save, go back to the web browser, and we can see that it is actually working. Excellent. Now let me tell you, this is a terrible approach to create multiple components in a single file. It's messy and it's not scalable. So to fix that, we can go ahead and create a new folder inside of this source folder, and we're going to call it components. Okay, now inside of this folder, let's create a new file and call it greetings.js. Perfect. Now, as I mentioned before, the name of the file is the same as the name of the component. Now, it doesn't have to be this way, but it's a good convention and it is a good habit to stick to. Okay. Right, so what we need to do here is, first of all, let's just cut this component out of here. Okay, cut it to our clipboard, and then go to the greetings file and press save. Right, so there's two more things we need to do in this file. Okay, I'll give you 5 seconds to figure this out, so pause this video and try to complete the two other steps. How did that go? Okay, so first we need to import React from React. So import React from React, and then right at the bottom we need to export this component so app.js can use it. So export default, and then the name of the component is greetings. Excellent. So now back in app.js, we first need to import this component. So just below this React import, we can say import greetings from, and then dot / and then it's this components folder, and then it's greetings. So now if I press save, go back to the web browser, we can see that everything is still the same. And just to prove that it is actually working, let's go to this greetings.js file and say learn React. What do I type here? Today. Let's just say learn React today. Press save, go back to the web browser, and it is indeed showing up. Okay, perfect. Right, so in the next section, we are going to learn how to pass data from one component to another. And this concept in React is called using props. This is a super important topic, and I'm very excited to get into it. So without any further ado, let's jump in. Now, React uses props to pass data from one component to another. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm not going to bore you with all these theories, so let's actually write some code and try and understand what props are. So here, where this greetings component is being rendered, we can pass it some properties. So the word props is actually short for properties, so we can name the props anything. Let's create a new prop and call it title. So just here, I'm going to pass title, and I'm going to set it equal to good morning. Okay, now the question is, where is this prop being stored? How do we access it? So to understand that, let's crack open our greetings.js file, and inside of this render method and above this return statement, let's type console.log this. And remember, the this keyword is referring to this greetings component. So now if I press save, go back to the web browser, let's launch our console. And here we can see that there is a greetings object, and inside of it there's a bunch of properties. One of those properties is this props object. And inside of it you can see that there is a title that we declared right there. And it does have indeed a message that reads good morning. Now everything that we pass in here is what is going to get stored in this props object. And to access this props object, all we have to do is type this. So remember, this is referring to this greetings component. So we can say this dot props. So let's save it and take a look in the console. So now all we're getting back is this title which reads good morning. Okay, so now if I add another prop, let's call it message and set it to it is a beautiful day. Press save, and now we can see that in this subject we've got two different props. Okay. Now to actually use these props in our greeting component, all we have to do is, in place of this h1, I'm going to replace this with this dot props dot title, and instead of this and inside of this paragraph tag, I'm going to say this dot props dot message. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of this console log. Perfect. So let's go back to our web browser, take a look, and we can see that good morning, and it is a beautiful day. And it is a beautiful day because now we know what props are. Perfect. Right, so let's move on. Okay, so everything that we have done so far has been very abstract. I mean, we've learned a few cool concepts, but they're just scattered all over the place. So to fix this problem, let's create a little project. Now, it's not going to be anything fancy, but it should be enough to reinforce all the concepts that we're going to be learning in this video. Okay, so first things first, let's create a new file in the components folder and call it counter.js. And if you haven't guessed already, we're going to create a little counter where we can increase or decrease a number count. So to set up this project, we first need to import React from React, and then create a new component, call it counter, and then extend React.component. Okay, now right here at the bottom, let's first make sure that we actually export it. So export default counter. Okay, perfect. So inside of it, let's create a render method. And then, oh, come on. And then inside of it, let's open the return statement. Why can I not spell today? Okay, right. So here we're gonna write our JSX template inside of a React fragment. So to open that, all we're gonna do is open up a pair of empty tags, just like that. And then here, first of all, let's create a h3 tag and call it counter. And then we're going to set its initial value to 0. Okay, so what's next? Now let's create a button, okay, with a sign of plus. And let's create another button with a sign of minus and another button with a sign of, well, not a sign, a button that reads reset. Perfect. Now to actually import this into our main app.js file, we first need to say import counter from, and then its components, and then counter. And to actually render this, we can say counter and then close this tag. Press save. Go back to the web browser, and we can actually see that this counter component is there. Okay, so now that we've got our basic structure in place, let's add some functionality. So how are we actually going to change this value? I mean, it doesn't matter what we do. There is no way for us to actually manipulate this, this value. So now is a good time to learn about state. So in the next section, we are going to go on a little tangent and learn about state. I'm very excited to dive into it, so let's carry on. So it is very easy to confuse props with state. After all, they're just plain JavaScript objects that contain data. So the main difference is that props are used to pass data from one component to another, while state is used inside a component and is used to keep track of changing data. Now, that change might be a result of a page refresh, a form submission, or a user click. It could be anything. So again, props are used to pass data, while state is used to manage and keep track of data. So to put this in practice, let's go ahead and actually use state. So inside of our main app component, let's create a new object and call it state. Okay, and yes, it has to be called state. Now, since this is an object, it can contain data in key value pairs. So the only piece of data that we need is the count. So for starters, let's create a new property called count and set its value to 0. Now we can actually use this piece of state right away. So to test your React knowledge, how do we think we would pass this piece of state from this component to our counter component? Well, if you think that we're going to use props, then you are absolutely correct. So to use this as a new prop, we first need to set this up. So within this counter tag, let's say count. And then we're going to make use of this keyword. So remember that this keyword is referring to this app component here. So, and then to access this state object, we can say this dot state, and then inside of the state is the property called count. Perfect. And now in our counter.js file, instead of the static 0, we can use the state from our app component. So remember, we passed it as a prop for this component. So to access it, we can say this.props.count. Now remember, this is JSX, so to actually insert JavaScript inside of it, we have to wrap it around in curly braces. Okay, so now if I press save, go back to the web browser just to make sure that everything is in place, which it seems to be. But just to prove that it is actually working, let's change the value of this count to 4. Press save, go back to the web browser, and we can see that there is actually 4 here. Okay, so we are making great progress. Let's keep moving on. Okay, so now we need to actually find a way to make these buttons work. Okay, but the problem is that those buttons live in our counter.js file, but the piece of state that we want to change lives in our app.js file. So how do we tackle this? Well, check this out. We can create a few methods here in this app component that interacts with this state, and then we can pass those methods as props for our counter component. Does that sound like fun? Let's do it. So first things first, let's actually create a method and figure out how we're going to use it in our counter component. So here I'm going to create a new method and I'm going to call it increase count. Okay. And for now, I'm just going to do a simple console log, and I'm going to say increase count. Perfect. Now to actually set this up as a prop, we can go to this counter tag, okay, and make a new prop called increase count and set this value to this. So remember, this refers to the app, and then the method that we're trying to access is this increase count. So this dot increase count. Okay. So now to actually use this in our counter file, we know that it's been passed as a prop here. And React provides us with a built-in method called onClick, and this onClick method gets triggered as soon as we click the given element. So check this out. Here if I say onClick and I set its value to this prop right here, which is increase count. So I'm going to copy it, and to access the props, what we do is this dot props dot and then increase count. Okay, go back to the web browser and let me just open up my console. So if I press this plus button, we can actually see that this method is getting triggered, and this is perfect because now we know how to actually communicate in one component to another. This is a great achievement, honestly. Okay, so let's do the same for every other button. So what I'm going to do is back in our app.js file, I'm going to go ahead and copy this, paste it here, and change that to decrease, as well as this console log, so decrease count. And then I'm going to create another method and I'm going to call it reset count. Okay, and I'm going to console log and I'm going to say reset count. Perfect. Now let's just go ahead and set this up here. So the next one is, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, set this as the name of the prop, and set its value to this dot decrease count, and then the same for reset. So reset count is equal to this dot reset count. Now back in our counter.js file, here we can say onClick equals this dot props dot decrease count, and then for the reset, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, paste it right here, and I'm going to change this to reset count. Now just to check that everything is still in place, let's just go ahead and tap this plus button. This is working, the minus button is working, and the reset button is working as well. Okay, so they all work. Right, so what's next? Okay, so now that we have a good basic structure in place, let's go ahead and actually try and change the value of the counter. So back in app.js, all we need to do to change the value of this count is go to this increase count method, and I'm going to get rid of this console log. So now you may be tempted to do something like this dot state dot count and then set its value to this dot state dot count plus 1. No, don't do that. Never directly manipulate the state. Instead, use a built-in method that React provides, and the method is called setState. So to access it, all we have to do is type this dot setState and then open up a pair of parentheses, and then inside of these open up a pair of curly braces, which means that we are opening an object, and then inside of this object we have access to all the properties that we have defined in our state here. In this case, the property is count, so we can say count and then set its value to this dot state dot count plus 1. So now if we press save, and then let's go ahead and test our work in the web browser. So now if we tap this plus button, we can see that there is an error. And basically React is complaining that it cannot find the binding of this keyword. Why? So in our app.js file, inside of this increase count method, we can see that there is this keyword. Okay? Meaning now it's bound to this increase count method instead of this app component, which it should be bound to initially. So to fix this, we first have to set up a constructor function right at the top of this component. So constructor, and then in here we can go ahead and bind all those methods to this parent component, which is app. So to do this, I'm going to say this dot, and then this keyword is referring to the app, and then to access one of his methods we can say this dot increase count and set its value to this dot increase count dot bind and then this. So what's going on here? So first we access the component using the this keyword, and then we have access to one of its methods, which in this case is the increase count, and then we set its value to this dot increase count, and then we use a JavaScript method called bind, and this takes an argument which is the this keyword. So this whole statement is telling the this keyword to bind itself to its parent component regardless of where the method takes place. Okay, so now if we press save, head back to the web browser, we can see that there is an other error. So what's going on here? So the issue here is that React does not know what we are trying to bind the this keyword to. Is it the app component or is it the React class? So to fix this, all we have to do is type super. Okay, so what is super? Now super is a built-in JavaScript method, and we use it to call the methods that already exist in the parent class. And in this case, the parent class is React. Okay, so now if I press save, head back to the web browser, and now if I try to tap this plus button, we can see that the count is indeed going up. Perfect. So now you may wonder, back when we were learning about classes and inheritance here, we declared our own method just about there, and we used the this keyword, but it seemed to work fine. And this is because we used the arrow function approach here. Okay, what an arrow function does is it does not bind the this keyword to itself. Instead, it sets the this keyword so it stays bound to this parent class. Now, fixing this issue that we ran into, was as simple as converting all our methods into arrow function. And I could have just skipped this constructor function part altogether, but I feel like I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't explain the underlying concepts first. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get rid of the constructor function altogether, and now all we have to do is convert these methods into arrow functions. So to do that, let's just go ahead and, come on, there we go. Same with that one. And same with the reset count as well. Perfect. And now to finish setting up these methods, let's go ahead and set the decrease count method and say, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, paste it here, and I'm going to change this to minus. And in this reset count, I'm going to set the value of the count to 0 because we're just trying to reset it. And now let's first go ahead and try to start with the 0 count. So now if I press save, go back to the web browser, we can see that we are able to increase the count as well as decrease the count. And if I press reset, it goes back to 0. So everything is working as expected, and this is perfect. Okay, so this is everything you need to know as far as understanding React goes. Now obviously there is a lot more to React, but the purpose of this video was to show you how JavaScript and its library work together to do everything that we were able to do in React. So in the next section, we are going to clean up this project a little bit, where you will learn about some more JavaScript techniques. This is going to be the last section of this tutorial, but do not skip it because it is super important in terms of code readability. So let's keep our momentum rolling and jump right in. Okay, so let's start with our app.js file. Right, so if we scroll down to this counter component, we can see that all the props that we pass to this component are almost together. So to improve this structure, let's go ahead and break these props down to their own lines. So reset count, and then the final one is count, and then just indent these a little bit, just like that. Perfect. Okay, so next let's learn about something called stateless functional components. Now, stateless functional components, as the title suggests, are the components that do not contain any kind of state. So let's crack open our counter.js file. And so stateless functional components don't contain any state, and due to that reason, we don't need to import all the unnecessary functionality that comes with class-based components, which is what we've used so far. So in this counter component, do we have any state? No. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut everything out inside of this return statement from there till there, and I'm going to completely get rid of this class-based component here. Instead, we can just create a regular arrow function and say const counter equals to an arrow function, and inside of here we can just return our JSX template, just like that. Let me just indent this properly. Okay, so now the problem here is the this keyword. The this keyword that we have here is not going to work because there is no class or object here anymore. So to fix this, all we have to do is get rid of this keyword completely. Okay, and now to access these props, all we have to do is pass this props as an argument here. There we go. So this props argument is an object, and all the props that we have passed here are going to get stored inside of this object. And we can simplify this even further. So to extract all the properties that we have passed here, we can create a new const above the return statement, and we can say const followed by a pair of curly braces, and this is called object destructuring, and this is a cool new feature in the newest version, well, not the newest, it came out in year 6 version of JavaScript, and it allows us to extract all the properties that live inside of an object. So to do that, the first property that we need is count, the second is increase count, the third is decrease count, and the final one is reset. And then we can set this to props. So now, instead of typing this whole props.increase count, which gets a bit repetitive, all we can do is just get rid of the props keyword altogether, delete it, and now look how much more cleaner this is. I mean, this is a lot more readable, and it just looks better to the eyes as well. Okay, so just to prove that it is still working, let's actually wait, something is not working. So I think this is reset count. Yeah, there we go. So let's go back to our web browser, and we can see that everything is still working as expected. This is perfect. Now let's go to our greetings.js file and do the same thing here. But doing that is going to be your task. So here's what I want you to do. First of all, convert this component into a stateless functional component, and then extract the properties out of this props object right here, and then use all these properties instead of this.props.title and then this.props.message. I'll give you 5 seconds to tackle this task, so good luck and give it your best shot. How did that go? So first of all, I'm going to cut everything out from this fragment to the closing tag, and then I'm going to get rid of this class, and I'm going to say const greetings equals, and then create a new parameter called props, create an arrow function, and inside of it a return statement. Come on, and paste it right here, and just indent this back a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to get rid of the this keyword in both these instances, and just above the return statement, I'm going to go ahead and say title and message is equal to props. And then I'm going to get rid of these two props right here. Perfect. Let's just save the file, go back to the web browser just to make sure that everything is still working, which it is. This is brilliant. And that is going to bring this lesson to a close. As I said, the purpose of this video was to help you understand React on a deeper level, and I hope I was able to complete this mission. So if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I am currently working on an express.js app, and it will be a complete project that uses MongoDB, and we will also learn how to make our app live on the internet. And I do have an Instagram page too, where I post programming tips and tricks. So if you have a question, just slide into my DMs. The handle is somewhere over here or in the video description. So again, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.